Hello and welcome back, MTG Burgeoning community. Hello and welcome back, YouTube viewing audience. If you are still part of the latter and have yet to join the former, you can change that right now by clicking the subscribe button below. By doing so, you become eligible for all of this channel's sweet rewards, all of which you can peruse in the description below. It's Tuesday, that means it's Build a Deck Tuesday, and in today's video we are going to complete our EDH Commander build of Lord Windgrace. Alright, Burgeonites, here we go. Today is the day, Build a Deck Tuesday. We finalize our Lands Matter Lord Windgrace deck. There he is. Lord Windgrace can be your commander, and he is for this build. It's Juned Lands Matter, and if you missed any of the previous videos of this series, you can click on them in the links below to bring you right up to speed. Very briefly, before we install the land base, let's take a look at the cards that have already been entered into this deck. Lotus Cobra, Skewt Swarm, Morog, Fury of Akum, Valakut Exploration, Omnath, Locus of Rage, Rampaging Baloths, Tireless Tracker, Avenger of Zendikar, Scapeshift, Crucible of Worlds, Life from the Loam, Ancient Green Warden, Reshape the Earth, Nahiri's Lithoforming, Splendid Reclamation, Realms Uncharted, Azusa Lost But Seeking, the Gitrog Monster, Exploration, Wayward Swordtooth, Mina and Den Wildborn, Ramunap Excavator, Burgeoning, Sword of the Animist, Roiling Regrowth, Harrow, Springbloom Druid, Crop Rotation, Skyshroud Claim, Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, Creeping Renaissance, Living Twister, Oracle of Moldiah, Nylea's Intervention, Borborygmus Enraged, Assassin's Trophy, Beast Within, Death Sprout, Putrefy, Krosan Grip, Hagra Mauling, Pernicious Deed, Necromantic Selection, In Garrick's Wake, Blasphemous Act, Ashaya, Soul of the World, Retreat to Hagra, Rada, Heart of Keld, Tectonic Reformation, Constant Mists, Zurin Orb, Renin 6, Demonic Tutor, Eternal Witness, Balaged Recovery, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and a Mana Crypt. Those are the spells. That is 59 strong right there, and with our commander that brings the entire total up to 60, so we left 40 slots to install our land base, and we are about to get into what those lands are right now. Land number 1, and the first choice to be included into this Lands Matter Juned Lord Windgrace build, it's Field of the Dead, folks. Enters the battlefield tapped. It taps for a colorless. However, whenever Field of the Dead or another land enters the battlefield under our control, if we control 7 or more lands with different names, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. We will easily have at least 7 lands with different names, and we are going to create so many 2/2 zombies. We could win many games with just the zombies we're going to create from Field of the Dead. That is land number 1. All right, so the next subset of lands that we're going to include, we're going to call these our quote-unquote fetch lands. Some are true fetch lands, and some are watered-down versions. So let's get to the true ones first. All right, we're going to start with a Bloodstained Mire. That's going to search us up a swamp or a mountain card. Polluted Delta, that's going to search us up just a swamp card. And Arid Mesa, that's going to search us up just a mountain card. And Prismatic Vista is going to search us up a basic land and puts it right into play untapped. And then to round out these 6 quote-unquote fetch lands, we got 1 copy of Terramorphic Expanse, which searches our library for a basic land and puts it into play tapped, and 1 copy of Evolving Wilds, which does the exact same thing. So those are our quote-unquote 6 fetch lands for the deck. They're going to help us to flush out the lands from our library and get them right into play. So what are these fetch lands going to search out? Well, the first cards that we're going to look at are the appropriate shock lands, a Stomping Ground, a Blood Crypt, and an Overgrown Tomb. Those will be targets number 1, 2, and 3. Not for, of course, Prismatic Vista, Evolving Wilds, or Terramorphic Expanse. Those are more for the true fetch lands. Next targets will be a Smoldering Marsh, which is our Swamp Mountain, and our Cinderglade, which is our Mountain Forest. Of course, those are the battle lands from Battle for Zendikar. Still waiting for them to complete that cycle of lands. That'll be sweet. And then we will also include a Canyon Slough, which is a swamp mountain. We can also cycle it for 2. It enters the battlefield tap, but that's okay because having it come into play to trigger our landfall abilities is what we're really looking to have happen anyways. And the cycling 2 is also a nice benefit. So Sheltered Thicket is also going to be included, which is our mountain forest. So these 7 lands all carry the land subtypes that Bloodstained Mire, Polluted Delta, and Arid Mesa care about. So that's why they're included so far in this deck. All right, next up, basic lands. Here they are. Basic lands. We got 5 basic swamps. And we're going to stay symmetrical here. We got 5 basic mountains. 2, 3, 4, 5. And of course, lastly, we got 5 basic forests. 15 basics out of 40. 15 basic lands out of 40 should work out pretty well. We'll be able to use our spells like Prismatic Vista, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and then, use lands like Prismatic Vista, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse to flush out the basic lands, in addition to cards like Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Springbloom Druid, and so forth. So on. All right, next set of lands. And these were a bit of a tricky land to include because under usual circumstances, I would never include these lands in a deck. However, for the purposes of this June Lands Matter deck, I reconsidered and thought these are going to be very, very valuable to include. And that's going to be each of the appropriate Rue lands. So the Rue lands, they come into play tapped, but when they come into play, we return a land we control to our excuse me. We return a land we control to our hand. And how this is important is if we have any of the numerous spells or creatures in our deck already that provide us with additional land drops, we play the Gruul Turf. We could return the Gruul Turf to our hand. We can return a tapped land to our hand. We can return any land to our hand. And this enables an additional land drop if we don't have another land in our hand. So with that in mind, Gruul Turf is in, Golgari Rot Farm is in, and Rakdos Carnarium are in too, because they are going to ensure that we can have as many land drops as possible by returning lands from the battlefield right back into our hand. If needed, of course. And still, they do tap for 2, and it is a way in which to get us a little bit ahead on mana with all the additional land drops that we have. All right, the next subset of cards, our next subset of lands, are important cards that will get into our graveyard, which, similar to the Rue bounce lands over there at the top right, enable the potential of having additional land drops if we don't have lands in our hand. And you'll understand that when you see Nurturing Peatland. All right, we pay 1 life, we add a black or a green. Or we pay a generic colorless mana, tap the sacrifice Nurturing Peatland to draw a card. So if we have no available lands in our hand and we got Nurturing Peatland on the battlefield, we pay 1, tap it, sacrifice it, draw a card. Then we play Nurturing Peatland from our graveyard and maybe rinse, lather, repeat for as many available land drops as we have. Nurturing Peatland is going to do some sneaky good work in this deck. All right, similar to Nurturing Peatland, but with a different payoff, we're going to play with a copy of Lake of the Dead. Now, when this comes into play, we sacrifice a swamp or we bury Lake of the Dead. So when this comes into play, we either sacrifice Lake of the Dead or we sacrifice a swamp. This taps for a black, but we can also tap this to sacrifice a swamp to add 4 black to our mana pool. So we can ensure that a swamp from our battlefield or Lake of the Dead can get into the graveyard, giving us the payoff of having Lake of the Dead in play or the payoff of 4 black to our mana pool, then allowing us to play the sacrificed lands from our graveyard to the battlefield if we have no available land drops in hand. Okay, so the theme of the graveyard usage of lands is becoming a little more apparent, I hope. Same idea as Lake of the Dead, a copy of Heart of Yavimaya. When it comes into play, we sacrifice a forest or we sacrifice Heart of Yavimaya. Taps for a green mana, and it taps to give target creature +1/+1 until end of turn. Its payoff is nowhere near as beneficial as Lake of the Dead. However, it does allow us to get a land into the graveyard for potential future playing. So Heart of Yavimaya is definitely worth inclusion in this deck. Next up, we're going to include a copy of Ghost Quarter. Taps for a colorless, but we can tap and sacrifice this to destroy a land. Its controller may search his or her library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. We could target this on our opponent's lands. However, I am not a proponent of opponent land destruction. So in some instances, we can do this to one of our own lands in order to get a basic land from our library into play, triggering our many landfall abilities. However, if you want to get mean with this deck and looking over the 60 spells, or looking over the 59 spells that we've already included outside of our general commander, with cards like Ramunap Excavator, Crucible of Worlds, and Ancient Green Warden, and all of the multiple spells we have for additional land drops, we can do some pretty good land destruction of our own, and then getting more lands into play, playing more lands from the graveyard, just could be something really bad. To take that and make it a little bit worse, and that's only if, our opponents are playing with a plethora of basic lands, with that same idea of nastiness in mind, one copy of Strip Mine. This is where things would get really, really bad. Again, this is not a deck that's intended to wipe out any player's land base. This is just included as a way in which to get a land into our graveyard. And for all intents and purposes, Strip Mine can get 2 lands into the graveyard. This one and one of our lands. Granted, we can also use it to destroy the occasional Gaia's Cradle, but to each their own. But we're going to include 1 copy of Strip Mine. All right, we are almost out of the lands that we're going to include. We're down to our last 3. And next up, 1 copy of Reliquary Tower. If you're a fan of the channel, I love this card. No maximum hand size. We have the propensity to have a lot of lands in our hand, a lot of cards in our hand, and I like to keep them in our hand as opposed to discarding down to the graveyard. 1 copy Reliquary Tower. And of course, 1 copy of Temple of the False God. This will be a great card to flush out with some of our spells like Reshape the Earth or Realms Uncharted, particularly if we already have at least 4 other lands on the battlefield. And lastly, card number 99 in the 99, 1 copy of the best land in our format, Command Tower. And that is the 100 cards, the General of Lord Windgrace, the 99 in front of you. This is our 3rd deck that we have completed during the Build a Deck series here at MTG Burgeoning. I cannot wait to sleeve this deck up, gameplay it, and play test it, and report back right here to see just exactly how powerful a deck the community has constructed this time. We began with Zaxara the Exemplary. We continued with Riku of Two Reflections, and now we've finished Lord Windgrace. This is MTG Burgeoning, folks. We will be back next week.